Rock out is Stone Cold. The Hellraiser is back.
Here we go. Evolution of the Shield.
John Cena versus the Showstopper.
Hulk Hogan and The Rock in the same ring.
You will never take my place at the head of the table.
Undertaker with a Hell's Gate submission. Oh my God! What?
My God, Michaels just kicked Cena's head off.
The Monday Night Wars have come to WrestleMania.
It'll be The Rock. It'll be Austin one-on-one.
Third and five to the Undertaker.
Do you believe in miracles?
The streak is over.
What's going on, guys? And welcome back to Rivalries on the WWE podcast on this April 23rd, 2021, as we approach WrestleMania Backlash. Does anyone else feel weird about this, that they've dubbed it WrestleMania Backlash? Quite like they made it WrestleMania SmackDown the day before, or the SmackDown leading into WrestleMania. It's kind of weird, the branding that has gone on since the COVID era kind of took over. You know, like every pay-per-view kind of had to have a cute slogan to it, like SummerSlam, You'll Never See It Coming, or Extreme Rules, the horror show. But, I mean, I guess that's kind of irrelevant. Just weird how WWE has gone about branding their specific shows. And another thing I wanted to bring up before we get into it today is that I wanted to say thank you to Mimi Burris. And I'm sure you guys have realized over the last number of weeks, we have a brand new intro to my Rivalry show. And that is full credit to Mimi. She did that all on her own, unprovoked, and she did it top to bottom. I had nothing to do with the production of that, so I really want to give a shout out to Mimi and a great job she does on the NXT review in the highs and lows of the week. And apparently she could have a future in production if she ever wanted to, because that is just such a kick-ass intro that she put together for this show. And speaking of this show, last week we traveled back to 2007 for Lashley and Trump versus McMahon and Umaga. And after going back and looking at the landscape of WWE during that time, I realized that it was kind of a transitional period for WWE in a lot of ways. And one of the things that I remembered, or that jolted my memory rather, when talking about Lashley and Umaga and where they were positioning Bobby Lashley at that time, was what was going on with the two other faces of the company. Because you have to remember, even though it never even got remotely close to the level of the WWE and the World Heavyweight Championship, they were really trying to push the ECW Championship as one of the main titles in WWE. And the two other title holders were John Cena and Batista. And I feel like 2007 was a turn for the worst for Batista. And that is what we're going to get into today, and that is Batista versus The Undertaker in 2007 that went beyond WrestleMania 23, as it was one of those rare occasions that their WrestleMania match wasn't the blow-off, but in fact kind of kick-started one of the principal rivalries of this year. So let's go back in time, and we'll take a look at where Batista was leading into the year 2007. In 2005, at WrestleMania 21, he obviously conquers Triple H and wins the World Heavyweight Championship, closes the show in the same pay-per-view that John Cena won his first ever world title when he defeated John Bradshaw Layfield for the WWE Championship over on SmackDown. So Batista defeats Triple H. He has a series of matches with Triple H that culminates at Vengeance 2005, and a rivalry that I have previously covered on this podcast. And following Vengeance 2005, him and John Cena swap places. Batista goes over to SmackDown and John Cena goes over to Raw. And, you know, on the surface, you can't really think too much about that. But if you dig a bit deeper, and Batista has said as much in interviews talking about that time in his career, it was almost like they recognized John Cena as the better of the two. And maybe they're right, but I don't know if Batista really got a fair shake here. And they sent him over to SmackDown, and 6 months into his tenure on SmackDown, he gets injured and has to relinquish the title in early 2006, and they put the strap on Kurt Angle and later Rey Mysterio to lead them into that new era of SmackDown. And Batista comes back following, I believe it was SummerSlam in 06, And the title holder at this point is King Booker. And I'm going to review a rivalry with King Booker at some point because it's such an underrated run for Booker T when he was the World Heavyweight Champion on SmackDown. And this leads to a SmackDown match, a SmackDown main event at Survivor Series 2006, where Batista finally gets an opportunity to regain his World Heavyweight Championship. And it leads to a Survivor Series contest against Booker T. And if memory serves me correctly, it was the whole, Batista's one last chance to win the World Championship because he had previously had a match against Booker on SmackDown. And he ends up regaining the championship. So almost a full calendar year at this point. I think it was like 11 and a half months since Batista had been world champion, or 10 and a half months. They put the strap back on him, and it was the right decision. Like, I know Mysterio had a brief run with it, but between you and me, it never really sat quite right when Mysterio was world champion, and Batista was the guy here. So leading into Royal Rumble 2008, or 2007, pardon me, you had Batista go in, defend the World Heavyweight Championship against Ken Kennedy, and there really was no proper heel opponent for Batista when you got to this point. Like, you had the run with King Booker, but again, I don't think they ever viewed Booker as a true main event guy, kind of like that tweener between a U.S. championship and sometimes in the main event role. JBL was now on commentary. Kurt Angle had left the company. Randy Orton was back on Monday Night Raw. So there really wasn't a proper heel counterpart for Batista to face. And, he goes against Ken Kennedy, and Mr. Kennedy was on the rise at this time, but he wasn't quite there yet. He had just had a United States Championship run as well. So then in comes the Royal Rumble match. And I remember watching this Royal Rumble, and it really, truly seemed completely wide open. And it came down to the Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels. And it was kind of rare, to see these two types of, at this point, you can make the case that they were already legacy stars at this juncture. And you had Undertaker representing SmackDown and HBK representing Raw. And the outcome of this match, to me, was one of the more surprising ones in Royal Rumble history.
But Undertaker sent two chair shots directly on the head. There's that face, though. That face where we saw him drop from 15 feet and still beat Mr. Kennedy. Look at this. That face has done it for the last 15 years here in the WWE. Undertaker saying, turn out the lights. Undertaker giving the signal that this one is over. Both of these legends want one more shot. Undertaker with Shawn Michaels up. Undertaker. Shawn Michaels realizing he's in trouble. Trying to slither his way out behind. Sweet chin music. Sweet chin music. Good gosh. But Michaels doesn't know where he is either. But from out of nowhere, the wherewithal and the instinct to deliver the sweet chin music to the jaw. That's the instinct of a champion. And both of these men have withstood so much punishment. I'm telling you, we're watching history. Undertaker trying to make it to his feet first. Shawn Michaels as well. Who would believe that the 20th Royal Rumble, the most star-studded, is quite frankly the best of them all. JBL, right now, who do you think? Who's got the most gas left in the tank? This is how Shawn Michaels eliminated Diesel. Here we go. Shawn Michaels eliminated Edge like that. With the sweet chin music. Undertaker. And it's Shawn Michaels. Undertaker is going to WrestleMania. Oh my gosh. For the first time in his illustrious career, The Undertaker has won the Royal Rumble match.
Well, I was shocked when this happened because, you heard them say it. For one, who it came down to. It was two legacy stars when the Royal Rumble has had a history of kind of catapulting guys. Like, let's look at the Royal Rumble winners before this. 06 was Mysterio. 05 was Batista. 04 was Benoit. 03 was Lesnar. Like, the Royal Rumble has a history of, having guys win to catapult them into main event status. And even this year, look at Bianca Belair. I guess this year, Edge winning it was a good example of maybe this type of victory that The Undertaker had. But even more so than this, I was surprised because I thought it was going to be Shawn Michaels. I thought that maybe they're going to give Shawn Michaels that one last main event push to main event WrestleMania. Ironically, he did main event WrestleMania that year with John Cena in a rivalry I already covered. So it was kind of a weird coincidence that even though Shawn Michaels lost the Rumble, he still got what he would have achieved had he won the Royal Rumble. But I digress. And had HBK won, he would have tied Stone Cold Steve Austin for the most Royal Rumble victories in WWE history, as at this point he had had 2. And Undertaker winning this was the first man ever to win the Royal Rumble while being the number 30 entrant. And aside from that, it was his first ever Royal Rumble victory. But above all else, I think what surprised me most about The Undertaker winning this match was the fact of where he had been placed on the SmackDown card for the preceding 2, 3, 4 years. Because to this point, The Undertaker had not held a world championship in 4.5 years. Yeah, think about that. The last time he had held a world championship, the WWE Undisputed Championship to be exact, was in the summer of 2002 when he dropped it to The Rock in a triple threat match at Vengeance. And he was still the big evil American badass character at that point. And since he had come back as the Dead Man, he had a kind of a brief feud with John Bradshaw Layfield, had a couple of kicks at the WWE Championship. But for the most part, The Undertaker was a character that, and he said it a bunch of times, other people have said it, he was a character that didn't really need the championship. So when they made him win the world title, it was going to be the first time that he was involved in a championship match at WrestleMania since I want to say WrestleMania 13 when he defeated Diesel for the WWF Championship. And it was just weird to see Undertaker placed as this. Like, the previous WrestleMania, he had fought Mark Henry, which was a very random contest for him. The year before that, it was Randy Orton. At WrestleMania 20, it was Kane. 2003, he was the second match on the card in a handicap match against the A-Train and Big Show. So it was kind of uncharted waters for The Undertaker as to how he was billed at this point. But they made the decision to go with him winning the Rumble and having the championship match of his choosing. And as I said last week, and as I said to open the show, they had put the ECW Championship on par with the World Heavyweight and the WWE Championship. They tried to build it as all 3 championships were of equal value. But, it was never a secret that was never the case. And as the years went on, that kind of started with this WrestleMania card, to be honest with you, which I'll get to. The World Heavyweight Championship quickly became less valued than the WWE Championship, which I'll get to soon. So it came down to The Undertaker having to choose the champion he wanted to face at WrestleMania. And this is right around the time when they kind of started not adhering to the brand split rules. Right when ECW came into the fold and there was 3 separate brands is when I found that, okay, you start having dual branded pay-per-views or tri-branded pay-per-views at this point because ECW was around. And you saw SmackDown competitors going on to Raw and ECW guys showing up on SmackDown and vice versa and whatever the term is if you have 3 different options. And it led to The Undertaker having a face-off with all 3 champions. WWE Champion John Cena, World Heavyweight Champion Batista, and Bobby Lashley holding the ECW title. And this happened when The Undertaker had to make a decision on Monday Night Raw.
Going to be the WWE Champion, John Cena. ECW Champion Bobby Lashley looking into the eyes of The Undertaker. Undertaker with an eye on Lashley's prize as well. Now look at this. Now The Undertaker eye to eye with Batista. Oh! will be the Undertaker and Friday Night SmackDown's Animal stepping up. These two men will face at WrestleMania for the heavyweight championship of the world, with the Undertaker's undefeated streak on the line. Oh, the Undertaker! Wait a minute, you can't do that! Bam! My God, what a choke slam! Undertaker can't choke slam Batista like that! The Undertaker!
So, The Undertaker chooses Batista, and to be honest, it was the right decision, because, you know, he wasn't going to face the ECW champion, Bobby Lashley. Like, let's be honest. I know WWE was trying to everything in their power to build Bobby Lashley on par with Cena and Batista. And to be honest, the visual made sense. Like, seeing Lashley beside Batista and Cena, he looked the part. He didn't play the part back then, but he looked the part. But the actual championship, ECW's or WWE's version of ECW had only been around for 10 months at this point, not even. So you knew it wasn't going to be Bobby Lashley. And then for Cena, I mean, in hindsight, maybe it would have made sense, right? Because aside from their 3-minute gimmick match at WrestleMania 34, these two never had a WrestleMania contest. So maybe that. But if you put yourself back in the moment as to where SmackDown was and Raw was, you know, on Monday Night Raw, you had Randy Orton, you had Edge, you had Shawn Michaels, you had Triple H, although he had gotten injured at this point. There were a lot of guys for John Cena to go toe-to-toe with that would have been worthy for a WrestleMania main event match on the Raw side. But you look over at SmackDown, and man, the choices were few and far between. You know, you had Chris Benoit, but he held the United States Championship. MVP was still not quite on that level. Ditto for Mr. Kennedy. Booker T, he had just had a run with that with the World Heavyweight Championship, and his, in my opinion, kind of got a bit stale after the World Heavyweight Championship run. And then you had, I think Rey Mysterio even got hurt at this point. Kurt Angle was long gone. The Great Khali, well, he was over on Monday Night Raw. So, I mean, it made sense for The Undertaker to fight Batista to main event SmackDown side of WrestleMania. And the build to this match was good. I gotta say that I really found that the chemistry these two guys had was almost second to none, because for two big power wrestlers to have the chemistry like they did, and another thing of two baby faces going against one another, it worked out really well. And this rivalry ran parallel with John Cena versus HBK. And it made sense because they were taking similar approaches to both matches. You know, the title holder going in was the up and coming star who had just reached the top of the mountain not 2 years prior. And then the guys facing them were two legacy stars who were trying their one last gasp at a world championship victories. And both of the programs featured two baby faces, which I know a lot of people don't like, but I'm kind of a fan of it. Like, I always remember Rock versus Austin at WrestleMania 17, although Austin turned heel to end that match. But I think it's kind of a lost art because it really shows, it kind of splits the crowd, you know? And that you had a lot of matches of these two teams against one another. They faced each other at the No Way Out pay-per-view, Cena and HBK versus Batista and Undertaker. But even though they were teaming, it wasn't without turbulation between Batista and The Undertaker. As much like we saw with John Cena versus Shawn Michaels, it was you know, the same thing with Batista and The Undertaker leading into their WrestleMania match at WrestleMania 23. But I remember watching this pay-per-view, and it was actually the last WrestleMania I watched live before WrestleMania 28 in 2012, because as I've previously mentioned, I really stopped watching as they exited out of the Ruthless Aggression Era. And I remember watching this at my buddy's place, and if memory serves me correctly, it was the first WrestleMania where they extended it to 4 hours. It was typically 8 to 11, but at this point they made it 7 to 11. And I think they may have abolished Sunday Night Heat, or they made it at 6 to 7, something like that. And I remember this match went on around 8:30 or 8:45. And I was stunned. And I believe even Batista has talked about how much it bothered him. Like, this match went on before the Battle of the Billionaires, which I covered last week. The main event was John Cena versus Shawn Michaels. And I think this even went on before the ECW Originals versus the New Breed, which is saying something. And I think this was the start of the downward trend of the World Heavyweight Championship. And it's not entirely fair to say that, because the very next year it closed the show with Edge versus The Undertaker. But I really found that this was indicative of how Vince McMahon and creative viewed the World Heavyweight Championship and SmackDown as a whole. Because before this, the only other time that the World Heavyweight Championship had gone on earlier than the second to last match was WrestleMania 19, when it was Triple H versus Booker T, and that went on before Rock, Austin, Hogan, McMahon, and Lesnar and Kurt Angle. Then the next 2 years it main evented the show, and then the year after this, when it went to SmackDown, it was the second to last match with Mysterio, Angle, and Randy Orton. But when they sent it out this early, I found it very bizarre. And it was also the second year in a row where the Royal Rumble winner didn't, in fact, main event WrestleMania, which is the whole point of winning the Royal Rumble. And it seemed like at this point, for for 4 years running, that whatever was the Raw main event was the main match on WrestleMania, which was weird because in the last 3 of 4 Royal Rumbles, it was SmackDown competitors who had won the Royal Rumble. So this is when you kind of started to see that no matter, and I say this, but then the very next WrestleMania, it was main evented by Edge and The Undertaker, so they kind of reversed it. But during this point, it was a trend where whatever the Raw main event was, that would be the one main eventing the show. And then following WrestleMania 24 in 2008, it kind of went right back to the WWE Championship taking, priority over the World Heavyweight title. But getting back in the moment here, I think that this match was arguably the best match on the card, and only rivaled by John Cena versus Shawn Michaels, just because it was just such a great match. And like I reviewed when I covered Cena versus HBK, that one kind of cemented John Cena as the face of the company, passing the torch, even though he had defeated Triple H at the WrestleMania prior. But Batista versus Undertaker, like I said, for two big men, it was a very brutal match. There was the power slam through the announce table by Batista on the Undertaker. A very brutal physical contest, which ultimately culminated with this.
Signaling the end is near. Stalking the animal. It is the animal who is being stalked now. Up in the air. Batista slips down the back. Spear! Can you believe the roller coaster ride in this match? If he hits it again. Batista going for the Batista bomb, and he got it! The streak is over! Oh my God! Is over! And Undertaker rolled the shoulder up. How the hell did he do that? And listen to this crowd, Michael. And look at the look on the face of the champion. Batista in disbelief. Has anybody ever kicked out of a Batista bomb? I've never seen it, Michael. Never. Going for a second, perhaps. These WWE fans in a near frenzy in full field. Undertaker missed with the right. The champion again kicked to the midsection. Look at this. Batista bounced off the turnbuckle. Undertaker. Oh my! Look at this. Tombstone pile driver. Wow. There's two. We have a new world champion. Oh my God! And the
And there you have it. The Undertaker wins his first world title in almost 5 years. And it's so crazy to watch back when the streak was still alive and well. And I remember the build to this match was the streak versus the championship. And I remember Batista always reiterating in the build to this match that he would not be intimidated. He would not be intimidated by the Undertaker. And during this match, you saw Batista's hard-hitting tactics really getting to the Undertaker. And to be honest, I found that this was the first time that I ever doubted the Undertaker winning because of where Batista was positioned on the card. Like, at this point, and I would say right up until this night, this WrestleMania in 2007 at Ford Field in Detroit, him and John Cena were on par. And when they went into this contest, I thought, like, maybe Batista's the guy. You know, they're pushing him hard. The fans were behind him. And as you heard in this clip, it was the first time that Batista had really gotten booed in favor of The Undertaker, which makes sense. The Undertaker is one of the most universally loved superstars in the history of the company. But you really saw with Batista losing this match and John Cena retaining where they were headed in terms of who the faces of the company were. The Undertaker secures the victory, and this leads to a WrestleMania rematch at Backlash. Not WrestleMania Backlash, just Backlash. And Batista actually, in one of the coolest spots ever, he spears Undertaker off of the stage that leads to a draw. And, you know, the famous draw in the last man standing match, a very good way to protect both competitors, as we saw in HBK versus Triple H, and one of the best last man standing matches ever at Royal Rumble 2004. And then this ultimately leads to another rematch on a SmackDown in May. And this is when the initial part of their rivalry finally came to a close. But what was ironic about it is that the close of their rivalry was not due to one of them walking away with the championship, but a certain man cashing in Money in the Bank.
He said he wanted to make an impact, Michael. And he said there wasn't anything anybody could do about it. You've got to be kidding me. No. No, come on, Edge. No, not this way. No, damn it. No. No. I can't. Championship match for the World Heavyweight Championship. This is not happening. Please tell me this is not happening. It's brilliant. It's brilliant, Michael. The referee is disgusted. I'm disgusted. Here's the cover. Hook of the leg. And Undertaker kicked out. Come on, Undertaker. Come on, Undertaker. Cover again. And again the champion kicks out. But how much does Undertaker have left? The referee had no choice. He spit. The referee had no choice but to make this match official. Edge is cashing the Money in the Bank. He won on Raw Monday night. And Undertaker. You're kidding me. The big Undertaker. Undertaker tried to sit up. He couldn't quite do it. After the assault by Mark Henry, the battle in the steel cage, but perhaps Edge is second-guessing himself here. What does he have to do to keep the Phenom down? Edge is a shark that smells blood in the water, Michael. He's become world champion like this before, and I don't care how many times The Undertaker sits up. He's got nothing left. Piranha! That Piranha Edge is measuring The Undertaker. He's a Piranha that could be our next world champion. The cover! Not this way! Not this way! Damn it! Here's your winner and the
So there you have it. After Edge cashes in the Money in the Bank contract on The Undertaker to win the World Heavyweight Championship, following a draw, another draw between Batista and The Undertaker, where both of their feet hit the ground first, exiting the steel cage, and then after The Undertaker retains the championship as a result of the draw, Mark Henry lays an onslaught on The Undertaker, leading for Edge to cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase, which he had just won from Mr. Kennedy on Monday Night Raw. And this was the first time we had ever seen a Raw guy cross over to SmackDown or vice versa to cash in Money in the Bank. And although we're talking about Batista and Undertaker, this was a big one because Edge cashing in kind of put this rivalry between Batista and The Undertaker on the back burner, and it lied dormant for almost 6 months here as they kind of went forward with Edge as the World Heavyweight Champion. But then Edge got injured quite soon thereafter. He had a match with Batista, I believe it was at Judgment Day, to which he retained the championship, and he actually had to give the belt up, and I believe it went to the Great Khali. But it eventually made its way back on SmackDown, that is, to Batista versus Undertaker at Cyber Sunday. And Batista retained the World Heavyweight Championship again, because at this point he had regained it back from the Great Khali. And when him and The Undertaker reignited their rivalry, he retained the championship again at Cyber Sunday. And then they fought one more time at SummerSlam, Survivor Series 2007 in a Hell in a Cell match where we finally got to see Batista really break the tie, because at this point you had one win for The Undertaker, one win for Batista, and 2 draws in which The Undertaker retained the World Heavyweight Championship. But finally, we saw Batista break the tie between him and The Undertaker.
Undertaker can't believe it! A camera on the skull! I can't believe it! What in the world? Where in the hell? No, it's wrong! It's all legal, Margo! It's all legal! Edge! Undertaker out of it! Batista out of it! Edge with a steel chair! The former world champion! Oh no. Oh no! Illegal, Margo. There's no way to stop this. Edge with the steel chair! A concerto! A thunderous concerto! A rabid Edge! A rage-infested Edge! The Undertaker's motionless. And now what the hell is he doing? Big Hanson's got to count. Why is he doing this? Big Hanson's got to count. Edge throwing Batista over the fallen Undertaker. Batista has no clue. Big Hanson has no choice. Batista retains the title. Not like this.
So, have you gotten onto a reoccurring theme here of Edge always sticking his nose in this rivalry? And it leads to Batista breaking the tie on The Undertaker in terms of their one-on-one contests against one another. But when he retains the championship inside Hell in a Cell, it is completely in part due to Edge, a returning Edge who comes back from injury for the first time in 4 or 5 months to try and put himself back in the title picture for the belt that he never truly lost. So Edge comes in, disguised as a cameraman, concertos Undertaker on the steel steps, drags Batista over, and Batista hangs on to the World Heavyweight Championship. And this ultimately culminates in a triple threat match between the three, in which the Edge wins the World Heavyweight Championship, which he held on to all the way to WrestleMania 24. And this kind of closed the book on Batista versus The Undertaker. For the time being, they reignited their rivalry for a short bit in 2009. But I'm focusing more on just 2007, where they kind of highlighted SmackDown for the entirety of this year, or almost the entirety of this year. And I found it kind of bittersweet, and I'll explain why. It seemed as though Batista and Undertaker was a stepping stone to Edge and Undertaker. And following this program, and I know Batista got back in the title picture eventually, more so with the WWE Championship, as he kind of moved over to Monday Night Raw to tangle with Randy Orton and eventually John Cena and all that. I don't think Batista really got a fair shake here, and he kind of got the short end of the stick because it was clear that they were moving in a direction of The Undertaker being the top babyface on SmackDown and Edge being the top heel. And those two main evented WrestleMania 24. And what did Batista do at WrestleMania 24? He had an interpromotional match with Umaga. So, I mean, what happened following the Batista Undertaker program was indicative of where they saw Batista. And he did get back into a quote-unquote one of the main events. I believe it was WrestleMania 25 where he fought John Cena for the World Heavyweight Championship or the WWE Championship. I don't remember quite exactly what it was. But we really saw that in terms of a top-level babyface, the company did not view Batista as such. And to be honest, I feel like although that they had quite a number of matches between Undertaker and Batista, they kind of missed the mark by transitioning it so fast over to Edge and The Undertaker. And we saw that right away in May of 2007. And to be honest, I don't know if we would have ever seen the two matches of Batista and Undertaker at Cyber Sunday and Survivor Series had Edge not gotten injured and they just kind of had to have Batista in there as a default guy and a placeholder for Edge to come back and take that place there. Because as I previously said, they needed that top-level heel on SmackDown, and Edge was the guy they transferred over from Monday Night Raw to SmackDown to fill that void. They tried with the Great Khali, but it just, for me personally, the Great Khali never really quite clicked. It never worked for me, and he was just a placeholder for a brief period from July to September for Edge to come back and take his rightful place on top of SmackDown. And he kind of held that place all the way until his retirement in 2010, I want to say. But as a whole, Batista and Undertaker, in my opinion, is an often underrated rivalry because if you look at the trajectory and how it played out, it ultimately kind of was just a representation of a stepping stone for Undertaker and Edge. But anyway, guys, that's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed Batista versus Undertaker, and maybe I'll come back and do Edge versus Undertaker next week, or maybe I'll try and shift times because we've kind of been stuck in this 06, 07 type of time period. So maybe I'll switch it up next week. I'll leave you guys on your toes and wondering what I'm going to do. But as always, you can get me on Twitter at ADemarco25. You can email Matt at WWE podcast at gmail.com. You can get him on Twitter at wrestling_audio. And as always, guys, don't forget to check out the Patreon page for the WWE podcast, where you could have all these shows ad-free for just $1 a month. And until next time, I hope you guys keep safe, and I'll talk to you next week.